Thank you. Have a great session.
Thanks, Rachel. Good morning, everybody. I'm Sharon Dooley, and I can't believe that I'm really dealing with SQL Server 2012 since I started with version 1.1, which was more years ago than probably some of you have been alive. But I am doing 2012, and I'm quite interested in this new 2012 feature called contained databases. Many of you have probably lived through the pain of moving a database from one server to another and having to get everything back in shape. Contained databases partially address that problem. They don't do everything yet. They probably will in the future, but they don't right now. And so let's talk about them. How did I get, there we go. We're going to first talk about what they are, and then make one and see how it works. And then we'll take an existing database and turn it into a contained database. And finally, if time permits, we will look at how contained databases and collations interact. So, contained database includes all the database settings and metadata that define the database. Okay, that's not unusual. Most databases do that. But what is different is that contained databases don't have any configuration dependencies on the SQL Server instance. You don't need any logins for contained databases. The users are authenticated at the database level. And that gets rid of that whole problem of orphaned users and really makes the database much more portable. Now, if you look at the left-hand side of the picture, we see the normal arrangement. We have a table of logins in the master database, and those logins are mapped to database users in each different database. We also have jobs in MSDB. With a contained database, we completely break the link between the database and the master database. It can stand alone. At this point, however, a database still may have dependencies on jobs that reside in MSDB, and that link is not broken yet. I expect it will be in some future release. I hope it will be, because then it will be so easy. Right now it's all a pain to move a database around. So, they give you more portability. You can use them with any of your high availability strategies. They work perfectly well with the new always-on high availability groups. And they actually make managing the disaster recovery site easier, since you don't have to create the login. As it is now, you got to keep your logins in sync between your primary site and your DR site. That problem goes away with a contained database. You can also set it up so that it's easier for mere mortals to manage things like backup and restore. Now, you give up some stuff. If you have a contained database, it can't use replication. It can't use change data capture, which is a big cost for people who are trying to maintain a data warehouse, data mart, and capture the changes made in the operational data store. You can't use change tracking. That may not be a big loss. What change tracking is designed for is to make it possible for the middle tier of a multi-level application to get current data without having to rerun the entire query. I don't think it's widely used. Most people I've worked with on this seem to say, well, I was refreshing it before. By requerying, I'll just do it again. And although I can't find any documentation on it, it appears that the use of service broker would be ruled out. And you'll see why as we go forward. Basically, if you have routes for service broker, they are considered not possible, not contained entities. Now, what we have today is partial containment. And that doesn't prevent you from using uncontained features. It doesn't prevent you from creating uncontained objects, such as jobs that use the database, or user-defined error messages stored in the sysmessages table. It's another thing I will be really glad when that becomes database-centric, because if you create your own error messages, you just have to remember to move them anywhere the database supporting the application moves. A fully contained database is the future. It doesn't allow anything that crosses the application boundary. Essentially, it doesn't allow anything that reaches outside the walls of the database. Fully contained databases are not available, and I have not heard any scuttlebutt about when they will be available. I have to assume they will be at some point. Now, before you can work with contained database, you have to set a server-wide option. And we'll do this in the demo. I'll go through all of this. Basically, you can do it with Management Studio by going to the server properties, or you can do it with SP-configure. It doesn't require a restart. You simply issue the reconfigure command if you use SP-configure. Once you've done that, you can create the database using whatever tool you normally use. If you use Management Studio, you can do it there. You'll see at the top of where the compatibility level and everything is, there's a drop down with where you select the containment type. You can use Transact SQL. It's merely a matter of including the statement containment equals partial in the create database statement. Then you have two new types of users. We've always had two ways of defining a login. We could do it with SQL Server authentication. We could do it with Windows authentication. Similarly, inside a contained database, we have two ways of creating database users. We can create a SQL user with a password. We can create a Windows user. Once that's done, everything you could do for a database user is identical to what you've always done in the past. Now, when you're going to connect to the contained database using Management Studio, you have to resist the impulse to click connect right off the bat. Okay? You tell it it's SQL Server authentication, and you enter the username and password just as you would for any SQL Server authentication login. But you can't click connect yet. You have to click the options button. And that will bring you to a screen where you choose the database that you want to connect to. Once you've done that, once you've selected the database, then you can click connect. It's a little bit trickier with Management Studio. For Windows authentication users, because you don't know the person's password, and what you have to do is bring up another instance of Management Studio, and you have to right-click on, well, before you bring up the instance, you right-click on the Management Studio icon and choose Run as User, and then you have to provide the Windows username and password. If you use SQL command, basically the same deal, okay? Server name, database name, username, password. ADO.net. Guess what? Your connection strings don't have to change. You've always been expected to put a catalog and name in the connection string. The one thing to be aware of is that if you're depending on default databases, that's not going to exist for contained database users. The default database goes with a login, not with a user. So that could bite you if your applications depend on a default database. Now, a contained user would be able to access other databases on the instance as long as those databases have an enabled guest user. And by default, the guest user is disabled, and many people don't allow guest users in their databases. Be careful about duplicate logins. It's possible to have a contained user with the same name as a login, but that's not really a good idea, because if the login fails to connect to a database, it won't connect at all. So I suggest that you not use, keep things separate. Logins are one class of people, and contained users are another class of people. Okay, let's see if we can demo this. That's my inbox, not what I want. I really want Management Studio. Now, let's start at the beginning and go to our server and look at the properties. And go to the advanced settings. Now, this is the way yours probably looks if you haven't started playing with this feature. But it needs to be set to true before you can create a contained database. Okay. And let's create a new database. And I'll just accept the default sizes because this is a kind of a toy database. And now I need to tell it I want it to be partially contained. Everything else about it is exactly the same as any database you have ever created. Now, so I have my contained database. And I'm not doing anything with logins. I want to go to security. And I want to create a new user. And this is what you'll see something new. You've got use a SQL user with password. You've got Windows user. And SQL user with password is what I'm going to create first. And my user is going to be named Patchwork. And her password is going to be Patchwork. Patchwork is a calico cat who looks like a badly pieced quilt. That's how she got her name. And so now we have Patchwork in the database. And I want to create another new user. And this is going to be a Windows user. And I'm going to go out and browse. And I want to make Tabitha a Windows user. Tabitha is also a cat. And I have to go find Tabitha again. No, I don't need a login name. Let's click OK. And so now if I expand my users folder, I can connect. I can see that I have Patchwork, my SQL user, and Tabitha, my Windows user. Now, let's assume that Patchwork wants to connect using Management Studio. Let's bring up another Management Studio. And I'm going to select SQL Server Authentication. And I'm going to connect this Patchwork. And I must click the Options button. And I'm going to have to go look for it. Yes, 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 yes. Tell me. She doesn't have permission to browse the server. So I'm just going to type it. Now, you see that Patchwork has a very interesting view. She only sees her connection, her database, sorry, the database, her contained database that she's connected to. Inside that, everything looks the same. There's not anything in this database except users, because I didn't create any tables or anything. Patchwork has no idea that there's a whole world out there that she can't see. Now let's shut this down, and let's see if I can at least show you the starting point for connecting with as a Windows user. I'm not sure I can remember Tabitha's password. Oh, sorry, I have to hold down the Shift key. Choose Run as Different User. All right, I can't remember Tabitha's password. I have no idea what I did. I just made her this morning. No. But that's how you get to the Management Studio, to connect as a contained user. So let's go back to PowerPoint, and okay, that's where I am. Now, maybe you get excited about this and think you want to change some existing database so that you can take advantage of the contained database features. And the first thing you're going to need to do is use a dynamic management view that will show you the uncontained entities. And that shows you things that are potentially uncontained. Now, it's not 100% perfect, because if you have stored procedures in the database that use dynamic SQL, it's going to be very difficult to find the boundaries, find that dynamic SQL, because nobody knows what it looks like until runtime. And if that dynamic SQL does access multiple databases, they'll have to have either the same contained user or a guest user. Once you've determined that it can be contained and fixed everything that would prevent it from being contained, it's simply a matter of using Alter Database or Management Studio to change the containment property of the database. Now, one of the things you're likely to find, and you'll see this when I do my demo, is that you have people that are associated with logins. And Microsoft does provide this stored procedure to migrate your logins to contained users. Now, the thing that you need to be aware of is that it only does this for SQL authentication users. And we'll see a bit more about that when I do my demo. So you have to give the name of the database user and then tell it whether you want to use the login name. Mine are usually the same. I almost never have a different username in the database from the login name, but it is possible. And whether you want to disable the login or not, which is I prefer to do that. This stored procedure is a bit finicky. Usually you can leave out that N in front of a literal string. The N indicates that it's a Unicode constant. And normally SQL Server just deals with it. But this stored procedure requires the N. It's just a pain in the neck. So let's take a look at this in action. And I have a database named the products database. And right now it has some users. It has Tabitha, and it has another user named Grimalkin, and Grimalkin is my third cat. But right now, if I look at the logins, I see I've got a SQL Server authentication login for Grimalkin, and I've got a Windows authentication login for Tabitha. Okay, that was there before. That didn't come as a result of my making Tabitha a Windows user in my contained database. So, they both exist. When I created it, you can see I created a login for Tabitha, created a login for Grimalkin, and then I made them database users. Now, we need to study this database to see if it can be contained. I saw it a minute ago. And I'm zooming this window a little bit. I didn't enlarge my font size, so it's a little hard to read unless you're up close and personal with it. So I'm going to run that. And it shows me two things. Okay. It shows me a database principal and a route. And database principal is presumably Tabitha. Sorry, presumably Grimalkin. Let's change this a bit. Right? Okay, so it shows me Grimalkin, which is the my SQL Server authentication login user. It doesn't show me Tabitha, even though she's got an associated login and is a user in the database. And I think this is a bug. But I reported this bug to Microsoft, and they gave me the answer they usually give me, which is that it's by design. So I get help with my SQL Server user, and I get help with my the service broker objects, but I don't get any help with my Windows authentication login. So let's go to the products database, and first of all, let's get rid of that service broker thing. Okay, I'm not using service broker. This is the root is always in every database, and I don't need it, so let's get rid of it. And so that should put us back down to the point where we only get Grimalkin. Okay? So now I've got to deal with Grimalkin. And let me zoom this window as well. Oh, let's try zooming the query window, not the results window. So I've got Grimalkin. I want to keep her login name, which happens to be this Grimalkin, and I want to disable her login. And so I run that query. All right, who am I? There is no user Grimalkin in the master database. Skipped a step. I didn't make the database contained. So let me I'll explain what I just did in a minute. So it's on the options page, and I want to set it to partial. The reason I made certain I was switched back to master, I need to close another window too before I click OK. If you have users in the database, when you're trying to switch it, it may hang, and I don't want it to hang. So let's see if it can work now. Let's click OK. And it's one of those things that doesn't give you an error message. Oh, it did give me an error message. It still got something in here, so. All right, let's try this again. There. And so I have done this, and it should show me that it is a contained database. Now I should be able to run this query. And it is done. So let's refresh this database. And let's refresh logins. And I still have Grimalkin as a user. But if I go to my logins folder, it's very hard to see on the screen, but there is a red arrow pointing down next to Grimalkin, which says that her login is disabled. And at this point, I could delete it or not. I would probably personally delete it because I don't like things hanging around that aren't real. There's nothing. Tabitha is still connected to her login. And it bothers me that that's the case because I don't know what will happen if I try to connect as Tabitha. But I have seen one case. If I connect as Grimalkin, I'm only going to see the products database. But because Tabitha still has this login, if I connect as Tabitha, I'm going to see all the databases. It's not going to be tight like it was when I connected as Patchwork and only saw Patchwork's contained database. So what I'm doing to make this complete is I'm going to get rid of, not my login, Tabitha's login. And I'm going to click OK. And it's going to give me a standard message that says it's not going to delete the database users associated with the logins. And that's the end result I want to come up with. So now I don't have any Tabitha login, but I still have a Tabitha user. And as I said, I would delete Grimalkin just for, because I don't like junk hanging around. Okay, so that's what you have to go through to migrate an existing database. And let's go on and look at the last piece of this, which is something that I wish they had extended beyond the limits of contained databases. It seems to me that it would be equally useful for any database. What they've done is introduce, they being Microsoft, is introduced something called the catalog collation. And that's used for the metadata and for transient objects. Now, it's not the same as your database collation. The database collation is whatever you choose. You don't get any choice of the collation for the catalog collation. It's predefined, and it cannot be changed. And this isn't fitting well. Let me just shrink up for a minute so I can show all three lines. My table is scrolling over the edge. So you've got this new keyword that can be used with the collate statement. In a non-contained database, it will be the same as the default collation, as the database collation. And you can, but where it, you see where it plays in, because if you have a contained database, it's going to use the catalog default for temporary data as well. Now, in most databases, if TempDB collation is different from the database collation, you'll get errors you can get errors when you combine temporary tables with database tables. If you have a contained database, you won't have these problems. Now, I would very much like it if I didn't ever have these problems when I was using temporary tables, but that doesn't seem to be what I'm going to be given. So let's take a look at how this works. And I have a database called FinishDB, and if I look at its properties, and you can see that its collation is the Finnish, Swedish, case insensitive, accent insensitive. And FinishDB has a table in it, a very simple little table with 4 people in it. Okay? And so I want to change some of these names. Susan, Tom, Dave. So I'm creating a temporary table. And I'm going to populate it. And now I'm going to, better be in my Finnish database, I'm going to try to do a join. Okay. And the default collation of my server is SQL Latin 1 General, and I get the message that there's a collation conflict between my Finnish-Swedish database and my SQL Latin 1 temporary table. So in order to fix that, I would have to either use a collate clause in my join or whatever. But I'm going to get rid of my temporary table. And I'm going to go in the master database and set the containment for my FinishDB. It's got a no weight on it. Why is it complaining? I had that table on open. Things are fighting with me. I'm always shooting myself in the foot with these newer commands that require that there be nobody in the database when you try to execute them. This says I'm 52. I typed the wrong number. What I was doing here, somewhat ineptly, is I ran SP-who to find out what connection number was holding on to FinishDB, and then I wanted to kill that user, and the first time I typed 52, which is the number of my process, and the SQL Server won't let you commit suicide. So good. That should have been simple. Now let's go back to finish. And create the same temporary table we created before. And I want to go up and grab my insert statements, so that since I already modified them. Put my people in. And do my join. Well, this has never happened to me before.
Sharon, we've got about 7 minutes left. Do you want to go ahead and take
Yes.
some questions?
Yeah, this shouldn't give this error message, but I can't figure out why it suddenly started to give this error message, and I don't think this is the place to debug it, so I'll just take questions.
Okay, that would be awesome. I have a question. Can you define a real scenario between contained databases would be the best version or the traditional DB?
I can define a couple of scenarios, but I think the strongest one is if you're doing disaster recovery. Whether you're using log shipping, mirroring, or always-on availability groups, if you use a regular database, you have got to make certain that every time a login and database user is added to the primary, the principal database, you have to make certain that the disaster recovery database, whether it's mirroring or your logship, you've got to make sure the login gets to that server, because when you restore the backup from when you restore transaction logs and your database backup and all, you're not going to have a login for the database user that lives in the database. So that I think is the primary scenario. Probably anytime you think you're going to have multiple copies of the database, whether you're making a copy, say you're making a reporting database, a copy to serve as a reporting database, you'd have the same problem. If they're all contained users, you don't have to worry about the logins, and it's just one less thing to think about.
Okay. And can you use fully contained databases and applications where processes are accessing linked servers to other SQL instances or even Oracle?
Okay, you can't, well, they're only partially contained now, okay? If you're depending on a linked server, whether it's another SQL server, Excel, or Oracle, or whatever, that's a server-level object. So your database has another dependency to the server. Now, as far as I can tell, this is assuming that, your code, well, your code is going to go with your database. So this is, at the present state, I don't think there'd be anything that would prevent you from creating a stored procedure that referenced a linked server, because nobody is not going to know what that's doing. In the future, it might preclude it, but today, as far as I know, it does not.
Okay, and can we configure contained databases to auto-close?
I haven't a clue. Let's see. What have I got? This is my pure contained database, which has nothing in it. Properties, options, and auto close. Let's click OK. It seems to be perfectly happy. However, the reason it never occurred to me to ask that question, which is why I didn't know the answer, is that I think auto-close can really create performance problems. And so I generally recommend against having it, because the model of modern web applications is that they connect, displace, and disconnect, and every time all the connections to a database go away, it shuts down, SQL Server shuts down all the structures you need to keep that database open, and then as soon as somebody comes back, it has to rebuild those structures. But it appears that I can do it.
Okay, and let's see. So a fully contained database cannot have a stored procedure or view that references another database?
It can, but that's going outside the boundary. But as long as that database that's out, the non-contained database, has a guest user, the contained database user can get in there. I have not experimented yet with creating the same contained user in two different databases. So what I know now is that it would have to go through guest.
Okay, and another question is difference between partial and full contained databases. Which decides to go with those?
Right now, your only choice is partial. You either have it non-contained or you have partial. That's all that Microsoft has made available. My hypothesis about what a fully contained database would include is that it would give me a method of having jobs that go with a specific database somehow stored in that database instead of MSDB, and have SQL Server agent able to find them. It would allow me to store error messages that I put in the sysmessages table in master. It would allow me to store those in the database and not be dependent on master. And there's probably, those would both be useful things. There's probably actually, for the people that are asking about things like link servers and stuff, there's probably a state somewhere between partial and full that it would be needed that would allow you to go outside the boundary but still have the authentication take place within the contained database. And that's a hypothesis on my part. I haven't ever heard Microsoft say anything that there would be full containment. I know that when we were working with the Community Technology Preview, we hoped it would full containment would come with release to manufacturing, but it didn't.
Okay, I think that pretty much wraps it up. And we appreciate you joining us today. And just as a reminder, everyone, our sessions are always recorded and will be made available by the end of the week. And if there were any questions that we didn't get to, I will send those over to Sharon, and she can either answer those to you directly. Or, Sharon, do you have a blog?
I don't have a blog. I just put my email on the screen.
Okay, perfect. And
I'm too lazy to blog.
Oh, come on.
It takes too much time.
Alrighty. Well, again, we appreciate you joining us today, and thank you everyone else for coming in and sitting through our webinar session.
Thank you for inviting me, Rachel. It was good to be here. And I just want to put in my plug for PAS. Don't forget, Summit's coming in October.
Sounds good. Yes, it's right around the corner, it feels like.
Yep, I've just started to look for hotel and plane, so.
Yep, it'll be here soon.
Yep, thanks a lot.
Okay, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.